Let's be real, no one expected Queen Camilla of all people to start naming names. After decades of staying quiet, blending into the royal background, and avoiding controversy like her life depended on it, she's finally opened up. And what came out? A list. Not of royal favorites, not of who she trusts, but of the 5 people she can't stand in the royal family. That's right, 5 royals who've pushed Camilla to her absolute limit. Let's start with someone who's been part of the royal drama long before most of us knew who Camilla even was. Prince Andrew. The guy went from being Queen Elizabeth's favorite son to becoming the walking headache of Buckingham Palace. He used to be seen as a war hero and a prince with charm, but now his name alone makes headlines for all the wrong reasons. Camilla watched his downfall not just as a royal, but as someone trying to clean up the royal image, and Andrew made that nearly impossible. You see, Camilla didn't enter the family with applause. She fought tooth and nail to move from scandalous mistress to respected queen consort. She worked behind the scenes, kept quiet, played the long game, but Andrew, he coasted. Lavish lifestyle, non-stop parties, scandals that refused to go away, especially the Epstein mess, and worst of all, even when the public turned on him, Andrew clung to his status like nothing ever happened. For Camilla, who built everything from scratch, that kind of entitlement wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous. He wasn't just a black sheep, he was a wrecking ball, crashing through everything she worked for. Now let's talk about a very different kind of royal headache, Kate Middleton. Oh yes, the picture-perfect princess herself. Elegant, graceful, practically flawless in the public eye. But behind all that royal sparkle, Camilla saw something else. Competition. Not because Kate ever tried to steal the spotlight, but because she didn't have to. Kate married into the family and instantly became Britain's sweetheart. The media loved her, the public adored her, and Camilla, well, she was still trying to escape the ghost of Princess Diana. What rubbed Camilla the wrong way was how effortless Kate made it all look. She hadn't faced the same ridicule, the same headlines, or the same uphill battle. Camilla came into the family through scandal and earned every bit of respect with time and grit. Kate just walked in and was crowned the future of the monarchy overnight. And it didn't help that inside the palace, things were just as tense. The staff picked sides, schedules clashed, and even though Camilla and Kate kept things civil in public, insiders say the warmth between them was non-existent. Camilla was formal, old school. Kate, warm, modern, relatable. It was like watching 2 generations of royalty trying to share the same spotlight, and only one was getting the glow. But if you think that was icy, let's shift gears to something much colder, Princess Anne. Now, this one's not loud or flashy. In fact, that's exactly the problem. Anne is the epitome of royal duty. Sharp, no nonsense, deeply private. She's been a rock in the family, always showing up, never complaining. But she's also never been a fan of Camilla. Not even a little. There's history there, the kind that never got talked about but was always felt in every public photo and stiff interaction. Anne didn't welcome Camilla into the family and she never pretended to. There were no sister-in-law bonding moments, just polite distance and cold professionalism. For Camilla, who was already walking on eggshells, that silent disapproval hit harder than any tabloid ever could. Anne never needed to raise her voice to make her opinion clear. Her silence alone was powerful. She didn't gossip. She didn't play politics. She simply showed through every stiff handshake and carefully measured glance that she didn't consider Camilla one of them. For someone like Camilla, who had spent years trying to reshape her image and earn a seat at the table, that unspoken rejection cut deep. And Anne wasn't just any royal. She was the daughter of Queen Elizabeth II, someone whose loyalty to the crown was unmatched. When Anne looked at Camilla, she saw someone who had disrupted that sacred order. But the coldest part? Anne never changed, not after the wedding, not after the coronation. She didn't shift her stance with time like others did. Camilla was tolerated, not embraced. And that, for someone who worked so hard to be seen as legitimate, was perhaps the harshest wound of all. Then there's Prince Harry. Now this one is layered. It wasn't just awkward smiles at family dinners or tension during public appearances. This was emotional, personal, and raw. To Camilla, Harry didn't just represent rebellion, he represented unfinished business, a living, breathing reminder of the most painful chapter of her royal journey. And Harry, he didn't hold back. In interviews, in his book, in public statements, he made it known that he never saw Camilla as family. Harry had loved his mother fiercely, and in his eyes, Camilla played a role in that heartbreak. Even as he grew older, even as the royal dynamics changed, that resentment never fully disappeared. He saw her as someone who manipulated the press, worked behind the scenes, and stepped into a role that once belonged to Diana. And while Camilla may have stayed quiet on the outside, those words stung badly. She had spent years trying to move forward, changing how people saw her, staying out of trouble, focusing on charity work, but Harry's words dragged it all back. Every headline, every whisper, every bit of judgment she thought she had finally escaped. He made it personal, and even worse, he made it public. From Camilla's point of view, Harry became more than just the troubled younger prince. He became a liability, a walking megaphone of royal grievances who wouldn't stop talking. She watched as he distanced himself from the family, moved to another country, and continued airing dirty laundry for the world to hear. For a woman who believed in keeping things behind palace doors, it was infuriating. Camilla liked control. Harry was chaos. But the one name that caused the deepest, most complicated emotions? Princess Diana. Camilla never truly had a chance to just be herself in the public's eyes, because Diana's shadow was always there. It wasn't just about romance, it was about legacy. Diana had become more than a princess. She was a cultural icon, a mother, a humanitarian, a symbol of love and heartbreak. And Camilla? She was always the other woman. Even after Diana's passing, the comparison never ended. Every time Camilla smiled at a charity event or stood beside Charles during official duties, people whispered. They remembered Diana's laugh, her style, her warmth. Camilla tried to ignore it, but it followed her everywhere. She could never win, and deep down, that wore her out. She had never even wanted this spotlight, not like this. But loving Charles came with a price, and that price was sharing space with a memory she could never replace. Diana's presence didn't need a crown or a title. It was embedded in every part of the monarchy, and for Camilla, that was the one ghost she could never outrun. Every time Camilla stepped onto a balcony or into a royal engagement, the whispers were there. Not spoken out loud, but loud enough in the way people looked at her, in the way headlines still tied her name to Diana's. She knew she would never be fully celebrated. At best, she could hope for quiet acceptance, but inside, that stung. Because she had worked for everything. Nothing about her journey was handed over. She had to survive public hatred, icy family dinners, and the endless storm of comparisons, all while keeping her head down and smiling through it. Charles saw her. He knew that was the only comfort. He stood by her, backed her publicly, and gave her the space to be more than just a supporting character in his life. But even his support couldn't shield her from the legacy of Diana. There were reminders everywhere, from charities Diana once championed to the press still referring to her as the people's princess, even decades later. And worst of all, Camilla wasn't trying to erase Diana. She just wanted to stop competing with her ghost. People often think hate is loud, but in Camilla's case, it was quiet, composed, and settled deep in the bones. She didn't throw tantrums or speak ill publicly. Her resentment was layered, complicated. It wasn't the kind that lashes out. It was the kind that simmers silently, building up over years of smiling through closed doors and clenching your jaw when you're being compared to someone who never even got the chance to grow old. And what made it harder was that Camilla wasn't all cold or calculated. She had her soft spots. She loved animals, had a dry sense of humor, and preferred small conversations over grand speeches. But none of that ever made it to the press. The public had already made up their mind about her. Once a villain, always a villain. And when people have labeled you that way, you either let it break you or you build your life around it and keep going. That's what she did. Still, that meant she carried her bitterness alone. With Andrew, she could stand the recklessness. With Kate, the quiet competition. With Anne, the constant judgment, with Harry, the emotional wounds that never closed, and with Diana, the legacy she could never live up to. It was a storm of resentment built from completely different places, but together it left her isolated, even in a palace filled with people. Some royals are born into power and feel entitled to it. Camilla never had that luxury. She came in as a controversial figure, slowly carved her space, and tried to bring some order into a family constantly on the edge of chaos. But in doing so, she learned that influence didn't always mean connection. You could be queen and still feel like an outsider at every family event. Her loyalty to Charles was unwavering, but her relationship with the rest of the family, fragile at best. She knew some would never trust her, some would never forgive her, and some would always look at her like she didn't belong. But she accepted it, not happily, but with the kind of dignity you develop after decades of surviving in silence. Maybe she never hated these 5 people in the way tabloids love to imagine. Maybe it was something deeper than hate, disappointment, discomfort, emotional scars that never healed. But one thing was certain: Camilla would never say their names out loud. She didn't need to. Her actions, her alliances, and the quiet distance she kept said more than words ever could.